At precisely 10:47 this morning, a former president of the United States came closer to jail than almost anyone ever imagined. Not in theory, not as a legal abstraction. He was one sentence away. One sentence. Inside a federal courtroom. The kind of moment unfolded that legal scholars are already describing as one of the sharpest tests of judicial authority in modern American history. And every second of it was recorded, on the official transcript, on video, and in real time. A federal judge looked directly at Donald Trump and delivered a command that left no room for interpretation. Sit down or go to jail. And here's the part that stunned everyone in the room. Trump didn't sit. What followed was a nerve-wracking 12-minute standoff. Court security suddenly moved into position. Lawyers rushed forward. Whispers turned into urgent physical intervention. And for those minutes, it felt as though the entire American legal system was holding its breath. I've spent hours combing through the transcripts, legal analysis, and firsthand accounts from people inside that courtroom. And I want to walk you through exactly what happened, because the truth of this moment is far more serious and far more revealing than the headlines suggest. But before we step into that room, you need to understand what was already building beneath the surface. For weeks, veteran court watchers had been sensing trouble, not through formal filings or dramatic motions, but through patterns, subtle signals that only experienced observers tend to notice. Trump has clashed with judges before. That part isn't new, but those clashes usually follow a familiar script. He shows up late to grab attention. He mutters just loudly enough to be heard. He saves his most incendiary comments for hallway microphones. Then he exits with defiant sound bites for the cameras. That's what everyone expected again. But this time, that pattern snapped. The warning signs started appearing the night before. Furious posts on Truth Social. A sudden reshuffling of legal personnel at the last minute. Extra security arriving unusually early. And perhaps most revealing of all, Trump's attorneys went quiet. No leaks. No preemptive statements. No media posturing. Here's something you learn when you've covered these cases long enough. When Donald Trump goes silent before a court appearance, it almost always means something is about to explode. Early this morning, courthouse security noted an unusual level of tension in the defense staging area. Emergency strategy meetings, closed-door huddles that hadn't happened in weeks. These are the kinds of last-minute conferences lawyers only call when they're bracing for volatility, a damaging witness, an unexpected ruling, or a client who might go completely off script. No one knew which scenario was unfolding. Some suspected all of them were converging at once. What observers could confirm was this. Trump's demeanor had shifted. And when a criminal defendant subtly changes posture or tone, seasoned judges notice immediately. Judge Engoron was watching closely. Now let's step inside the courtroom. Trump sat at the defense table in his trademark navy suit, composed on the surface. The prosecution was questioning a key financial witness. The testimony was routine, procedural, almost boring by courtroom standards. And then it happened. Trump didn't lean over to whisper to his lawyer. He didn't pass a note. He spoke out loud, clear, sharp, and directed straight at the witness. That's a lie, a total fabrication. The reaction was instant. The room froze. Pens stopped mid-sentence. Attorneys looked up in unison. Spectators went silent. In the overflow room, camera operators leaned forward, knowing something extraordinary was unfolding. Judge Engoron slowly removed his reading glasses. What came next wasn't a standard warning. It wasn't procedural housekeeping, and it certainly wasn't polite. Legal analysts who later reviewed the transcript described the judge's response as immediate, unmistakable, and firmly grounded in federal contempt authority. "Mr. Trump," the judge said, his voice cutting through the silence, "you will not speak unless addressed. You will not interrupt these proceedings. Do you understand?" And this is where everything took a turn. Trump didn't retreat. Seconds later, he leaned back and said, loud enough for the court reporter to capture, "This whole thing is a joke. A complete joke." Pause on that for a moment. A defendant in an active federal trial openly mocked a sitting judge on the record immediately after receiving a direct warning. These were not the words of someone seeking leniency. They were the words of someone testing whether anyone in that room actually had the power to stop him. Judge Engoron answered that test. Court records confirm he issued not one, not two, but 3 escalating warnings in just 4 minutes. The first followed Trump's interruption of testimony. The second came when Trump scoffed audibly and muttered "kangaroo court," while the prosecutor continued speaking. The third came when Trump physically stood up from his chair. "Mr. Trump, sit down immediately," the judge ordered. "Sit down now, or I will have you removed from this courtroom and placed in a detention cell for the remainder of today's proceedings." That word, detention, hit the room like a shockwave. Think about what just happened. A federal judge presiding over an ongoing trial told a former president of the United States that he would be put in a jail cell if he didn't comply. This was no longer a warning. It was a legally enforceable command with immediate consequences. Trump's lead attorney, Alina Habba, jumped to her feet and requested an emergency sidebar. The judge allowed it. For 12 agonizing minutes, lawyers huddled at the bench, whispering urgently. During that entire time, Trump remained standing at the defense table, arms crossed, jaw tight, refusing to sit. When the sidebar ended, Habba returned and leaned in close, speaking rapidly into Trump's ear. He shook his head. She tried again, more forcefully. He turned away. Then came the moment that matters most. She placed her hand firmly on his shoulder. That physical intervention, his own lawyer stepping in, was what finally made Trump lower himself, slowly and reluctantly, back into his chair. Let this sink in. Trump's legal team had to physically intervene to prevent him from being taken into custody in the middle of his own fraud trial. Now here's why Judge Engoron's response was so significant. This wasn't about manners. It wasn't about courtroom etiquette. It was about safeguarding the judicial process itself. Trump's behavior wasn't merely disrespectful. It threatened to destabilize the proceedings. And the judge responded with maximum authority, not emotion. Not retaliation, pure judicial control. He cited specific contempt statutes. He referenced established incarceration precedents. That precision matters. Former federal prosecutors speaking anonymously described Trump's conduct as calculated provocation, possibly designed to trigger a mistrial or lay groundwork for appeal. But Judge Engoron shut that door. His responses were legally airtight, delivered with such clarity that there was no ambiguity and no room for misinterpretation. And critically, no room for appeal. That level of preparation sends a message. This scenario was anticipated. This judge is not passively presiding. He is actively managing a defendant who behaves as though rules don't apply to him. Here's what most people will miss when scanning headlines. Trump has spent decades believing he can overwhelm opposition through pressure, spectacle, and persistence. That eventually, every room bends. Federal judges don't bend. They hold lifetime appointments. They're insulated from political pressure, and they wield something Trump rarely encounters: enforceable authority. The judge's warning is now permanently embedded in the official court record. It wasn't meant to embarrass Trump. It was meant to draw a line. This courtroom will not tolerate obstruction, intimidation, or performance theatrics. Translated into plain language, you are not special. Follow the rules or face the same consequences as anyone else. You almost never hear that tone from a federal judge unless the stakes are extraordinarily high. And this wasn't an isolated moment. Look at what unfolded in just 6 hours. Trump interrupted sworn testimony in the morning. During lunch, he attacked the judge on Truth Social. His lawyers filed motions questioning the judge's impartiality. Outside the courthouse, Trump told reporters the trial was a disgrace to America. Same day, same 6-hour window. When Trump moves on multiple fronts at once, it signals a larger strategy. Legal analysts are now weighing several disturbing possibilities. He may be laying groundwork to boycott future proceedings. He could be trying to provoke a mistrial through sustained disruption. Or, and this is the most concerning, he may be testing whether he can openly defy a court order and force a constitutional crisis. Context matters here. Trump is under enormous pressure. His lawyers want silence to avoid contempt. His political advisors want defiance for optics. Donors want persecution narratives. His base wants visible combat. And he's juggling all of that while facing multiple criminal cases across jurisdictions. When defendants make sudden dramatic moves under those conditions, it's not strength, it's strain. Today, Judge Engoron removed one option from Trump's playbook. No vague warnings, no delays, no deference, just a clear command: comply or go to jail. And this matters far beyond courtroom drama. What we're witnessing is a stress test of the American rule of law. Trump is probing whether the system can be bent, The judge is demonstrating that it still holds. Prosecutors are working to keep the trial on track. And the public is watching to see whether justice applies equally. Trump believed he could stall indefinitely, intimidate witnesses, pressure the court through media. He believed he was untouchable. Tonight, the opposite is happening. The trial is moving forward. Witnesses are testifying under oath. And a federal judge is holding a former president accountable, on camera, on the record, in real time. Outside the courthouse, the lead prosecutor made brief remarks. She emphasized the case will proceed as scheduled and warned that further disruptions will bring serious consequences. These weren't sound bites. They were formal statements from a team that understands exactly how high the stakes are. So what comes next? More details will emerge about what Trump hoped to accomplish today. But one thing is already clear. The judge's response preserved order, protected the integrity of the trial, and reinforced constitutional authority. What happens now depends entirely on Trump. If he complies, this could mark a turning point toward accountability. If he defies the court again, the judge has already shown he's prepared to act, and incarceration is on the table. Reports tonight say Trump's legal team is scrambling. Mar-a-Lago is unusually quiet. And when Trump goes quiet after a confrontation like this, it usually means he's recalculating. Today, Trump was reminded of something he has spent his life resisting. Courts have real power. Judges have binding authority. And no one, not even a former president, is above the law. Three takeaways matter most. A federal judge issued a direct, enforceable threat to jail a former president. This was real, immediate, and unprecedented. Trump's own attorneys had to physically intervene to stop him from being removed from court. And this wasn't accidental. Trump appears to be testing limits, manufacturing leverage, or setting the stage for something larger. But today, the court pushed back harder than he expected. The courtroom held. The judge stood firm. And for the first time in this saga, Donald Trump appears genuinely uncertain about what happens next. This story isn't over. I'll continue breaking down every development as it unfolds. And if this analysis helped you understand what actually happened, not just the headlines, but the legal mechanics, consider subscribing. And let me know in the comments, do you think Trump will comply from here on out? Or are we headed toward an even bigger confrontation?